My name's Theresa Choh-Lee. I'm 55 years old. I was born in Seoul, Korea, and I immigrated to the United States in 1972. I'm the youngest of three, and we moved to Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, of all places. So this is this is a story actually on Korean American Stories interview of my mom. When they asked my mom, "What's your biggest regret?" she immediately said, "Oh, when my children were young and we lived in this town called Akron, Ohio, we didn't have very much money. So I made the kids come home to eat lunch instead of paying," she said it was 35 cents at the time, like, I think it was a subsidized lunch price. I had mac and cheese every day with sliced pickles as my kimchi, so that my breath wouldn't smell with real kimchi. And it wasn't even like Kraft macaroni and cheese, it was the store brand that was probably like 4 for $1 or something. So we did not have very many luxuries growing up. Growing up in the Midwest, in the circles that I was in, for whatever reason, and the school system I was in is very middle class. There was no kind of huge aspiration for like Ivy League schools. I think my family had low expectations too, because I'm the youngest, I'm a girl. My brother was the one who was expected to be the doctor of the family. So I was just sort of like third wheel, you know? So I think my parents just thought, oh, she'll go to Ohio State, follow, you know, the steps of her siblings. But my high school chemistry teacher told me about this strange major called paper science and engineering at a school, state school called Miami University. And I was like, what the heck is that? You know, and all he said was, oh, they give out tons of scholarships. You know, you can get a full scholarship. You can work also as a co-op student and make money. And I was like, sign me up, you know? So I didn't even know what engineering was. I didn't even know what, you know, anything about paper science. So sight unseen, my parents never took me to the school to visit. I just applied on my own. They had no idea I was doing this. And then I got the scholarship. So then I got to go to school essentially for free. And I just wanted to be financially independent. I didn't want to have to rely on my parents. Yeah, I've thought about it a lot, like why was that the case? And I think it's because my parents, the few times I saw them fighting or having kind of loud discussions at the kitchen table, it was about money. Even things like tithing to the church, you know, where my dad was very generous and my mom was like, can we really afford that? You know, so she was always the one who played that role in the family. I didn't want to be any kind of additional burden, right, on the family. So I think that probably drove me to want to just not have to rely on them at all. So I was a senior in college, and my brother invited me to a church retreat at his college at Ohio State. And I was going to Miami University, so I drove up, and the guest speaker at this church retreat was a person named Reverend Charles Rue. He was the first person ever to help me acknowledge and love who I am as a Korean American. Yeah, Pastor Reverend Charles Rue was the first to say, you know, be proud of being Korean American. You know, you've got the best of both worlds, and just sort of embrace it and love it. God made you this way, and really switched my thinking and made me much more proud of who I am. So he said, hey, I have this church in Manhattan, and it's, you know, filled with young Korean Americans, and we worship in English. And I was like, what? You know, how is that possible? Because all of the Korean churches that I'd been to have worship in Korean, and they're designed for people like my parents. So I was shocked to know that there was enough people like me, that there could be a church for us. So yeah, he gave me his card, and he said, hey, if you're ever in New York, give me a shout. So I had a job interview my senior year in New Jersey. And so I called him. He set me up with somebody at the church. I stayed with her. And she said, well, I'm happy to bring you to church on Sunday, but Saturday night I'm going to this dinner party. Do you want to come with me? And I said, sure. I had knew nobody else, in the city. So she took me to a dinner party at HJ Lee's house. And he was, we ended up heading it off. He offered to drive me to the airport. I was like, yeah, that's, so yeah, after church, I waited for him to drive me to the airport, but he was stuck in a meeting, a church council meeting. And back then we had no cell phones. So I didn't know what to do. And this other man offered to drive me to church or to the airport. So I just took the offer because, I didn't want to spend the money on a cab, and this other person was offering. So anyway, I flew back to Ohio to my dorm, and I called HJ and I said, hey, I just want to let you know, I'm really sorry I couldn't meet you, but I really had to leave. I didn't know how to get a hold of you. I was pretty just straightforward, normal, in terms of my communication, and no dancing around, So HJ said that this was the phone call that sealed the deal. So we got married in 1990. We only knew each other about a year and a half before we actually got married. So it was pretty quick. At the time, I think it was called DINKS, dual income, no kids. That was us. HJ was working in the software industry, in sales. I was working as an engineer. And at home, it was, at the time, actually unusual in that we shared our tasks at home. When we had children, it got even more different because I had my first child, Nina, when I was a first-year student at Columbia Business School. So it was 1996. Nina was 3 months old. We hired a nanny for child care. But on the weekends and such, HJ had to be the primary caregiver because I would have to be doing projects with my classmates or just studying to keep up with school. And then I graduated from business school, worked full-time, HJ worked full-time. So we had that kind of started off our relationship being non-traditional. Okay, so HJ and I were rocking and rolling. We were both being really good dinks, dual income, no kids. Then we had 2 kids. We were both working. Everything's humming along. Both our careers are progressing well. And then 2008 hit. And that was, a very difficult time. So HJ's company was having financial difficulties and had to have massive layoffs. And so HJ got laid off. And HJ did what any natural person would do, is look for another job, right? So he did the whole process of networking and, going on interviews and what have you, but nothing really came that he felt right about. Yeah, then one day, he came to me and just started talking about how, when he was, I guess, younger, he had these visions of kind of the Korean American population in New York in particular, and kind of the imagery of the Korean American grocer, and remembering the stories of his mom when he was growing up. And somehow that evolved into, can this become a nonprofit, something that can actually capture and create these stories. So when it first started, I did it very reluctantly in terms of supporting HJ. Let's be honest. In the beginning, it was very much like, okay, let's just try it out. Like, let's a year, 1 year, okay, maybe 2 years, And I was cool with, my husband being like sharing the kitchen with me and child rearing responsibilities. But the thought of being the only breadwinner was like scary. But then part of me is like, what is wrong with you? Because men do this all the time. It was like this internal turmoil because intellectually I knew this shouldn't bother me. Like, why should it bother me? But I think there was also a point where it got worse again. And I think if I remember correctly, it was when I lost my job. So I can't remember what year it was, but I had a layoff situation that I faced. So here we were now, a couple with neither of us earning an income. Yeah, that was super tough. But yeah, I think we definitely had our share of late night crying sessions. I eventually landed a new role, and then the financial stress was off of me. Then the nonprofit started to grow to the point where we could hire staff, and so HJ had support now, and yeah, there's just like it's a journey, ups and downs, and so much of our life's work and energy has gone into it. And I do think that everything that we are creating is so important. Had I had something like this when I was growing up in Ohio, I think I would have gotten to a much more comfortable self, much sooner, which is invaluable. So I'm super proud.
Was it worth it? All that suffering that you went through?
Yeah, it was worth it. Yeah. My name is Theresa Choh-Lee, and this is my Korean American story.